Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Leon Levi with Retro Pocket. And to be honest, I feel like Anbernic is making the same console over and over again with similar specs, just in a different form. And the RG Vita is where that really started to stand out to me. On paper, it sounds awesome. A Vita-style handheld, modern Android, and that familiar Anbernic comfort. But once I actually dug into what it offers and how it stacks up against other options, I ended up feeling more conflicted than impressed. There's a mix of genuinely nice things here and some frustrating choices that explain why a lot of people are underwhelmed. Design-wise, I'll admit it. From a distance, the RG Vita looks pretty cool. It definitely gives off that Vita-inspired vibe, and if you've ever owned the original, it's hard not to feel a little nostalgic when you first see it. The white body, the layout, and the general silhouette are instantly recognizable. But when you look closer, it doesn't quite capture the same charm. Some of the small, iconic details from the original Vita just aren't there, and the RG Vita ends up a little bulkier and less sleek than you might expect. It's not ugly or badly built. It just feels more like inspired by rather than a really faithful premium tribute. The screen is a good example of that almost great feeling. On first impression, it looks fine. Colors are decent, brightness is usable indoors, and the aspect ratio works well for a lot of content. For casual play, it'll probably be totally okay for most people. But if you're picky, you start to notice things like over-sharpening and a slightly processed look to the image. It's not that the screen is unusable or terrible. It's more that it doesn't quite match the expectations you might have for a device trying to tap into that Vita nostalgia. I found myself wishing Anbernic had tuned it just a bit better instead of reusing what feels like familiar settings. The controls are kind of in that same good but not special category. The D-pad and buttons are generally fine and very recognizable if you've used other Anbernic handhelds. They're definitely usable for long sessions, and nothing here is a deal breaker. At the same time, there are small things that keep it from feeling truly stand out. The buttons don't feel as snappy or premium as they could, and the triggers, while functional, aren't the analog style that racing and certain 3D games really benefit from. So you end up with controls that do the job well enough, but don't really elevate the experience beyond what Anbernic has already done before. Inside, the performance is basically exactly what you'd expect from this class of device. The chip they're using is a known quantity by now, and it handles classic systems like NES, SNES, Mega Drive, PS1, and most PSP and Dreamcast titles just fine. For a lot of retro fans, that alone might make it a perfectly acceptable handheld. Where some people start to get disappointed is when they realize there's nothing particularly new here. Performance-wise, if they've seen other recent handhelds, it doesn't unlock a big new tier of emulation or suddenly make harder systems easy. It's more of a solid mid-range device than a game changer, and that can feel underwhelming if you were expecting something more ambitious. The biggest expectation issue, of course, is the Vita name itself. The device is clearly themed around Sony's handheld, but it can't realistically promise native-level Vita gaming, especially not in a simple plug-and-play way. Emulation for that system on Android is still complicated and inconsistent in general. So if someone heard the name RG Vita and assumed it would be a true Vita replacement, they're probably going to feel let down. If you go into it thinking, this is a retro handheld that happens to look like a Vita, instead of this is a Vita I can rebuy, it feels a lot more reasonable. The software experience follows the usual Anbernic pattern. Out of the box, it's usable. You can power it on, browse your library, and start playing with little fuss. But if you're the kind of person who's picky about emulators, front ends, and settings, you'll probably end up tuning things and swapping a few apps out. That's not unique to Anbernic, to be fair. It's pretty common in this scene. But it does contribute to that sense that they haven't quite nailed a truly polished, beginner-friendly experience yet. It works, but still feels like there's room for refinement. Comfort and ergonomics are a bit of a mixed bag. The wider body and layout make it reasonably comfortable to hold, especially if you have bigger hands, and the stick placement is familiar. At the same time, the overall size and shape mean it doesn't feel as sleek or portable as the original Vita. It's more of a throw-it-in-a-bag device than something you'd slide into a small pocket. For some people, that trade-off is fine. For others who were expecting a near one-to-one Vita feel, it's another small disappointment that adds up. Where the frustration really comes from, at least for me, is less about the RG Vita being a bad handheld and more about what it represents for Anbernic's direction. It feels like they're leaning heavily on nostalgia and on forms we already recognize, while mostly reusing the same internal recipe they've been using for a while. If this were your first or second retro handheld, you might actually be happy with it. But if you've been following the scene and you've seen a bunch of previous devices, it starts to blend together and feel a bit safe. And that's really the core of why people are hating on it, or at least feeling disappointed. I feel like Anbernic is just reskinning the same hardware formula and hoping nostalgia will carry it every time. The RG Vita isn't a total failure, obviously. It's functional. It plays a lot of classic systems fine, and it looks cool from a distance. But it also feels like the laziest possible version of what a Vita-inspired handheld could be. When you name a device after a beloved console, you set expectations, and this thing just doesn't meet them in a meaningful way. Instead of feeling like a love letter to the Vita, it feels like another generic Android handheld wearing a Vita costume, and that's exactly why so many people are rolling their eyes instead of reaching for their wallets. That's all for this video, everyone. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.